And I said, Dad, this is what they said. And I go, I know that studies show that testosterone increases blood perfusion to the heart by 68%. I know that there's some great doctors that do chelation. I know doctors out here that do vitamin therapy. I know that if we got you on a strict diet and lost some weight. And he said to me, he goes, my mother died at 24. My father died at 60. Maybe it's my turn to go. And I said to him, I go, you know, if you think it's your turn to go, then you're crazy, and I'm going to call Bellevue. We should fight not to die. We should fight to live the best life that we can, and we should fight to get the knowledge to do that. And he looked at me and he said, I'm putting my life in your hands. Let it be whatever God wants it to be. And I took him out here. And one of the doctors that helped me right there is Dr. George, did the chelation. And he helped him, okay, with chelation. And we helped him with hormones. And we helped him with vitamins. And we helped him with everything in my arsenal. The man that could not walk 2 blocks and was told that he was going to die if he went and strained on the toilet bowl, okay? In 2.5 months, we went past the 0.75 mile marker at Squaw Peak. And when we got up there, he looked at the last part going up and he said, you know what, I can make it. He goes, but I won't, because I'm scared that I may fall and break something and then you'd have to carry me down. So he brought me down. We went back down and I had this old car and we're sitting there and he's going like this in his hands. And I go, Pop, what's the matter? And he says to me, he goes, thank you for saving my life. That's my father right there. Okay? And that was 5 years ago. And subsequently, we got him to move out to Arizona, and he's very happy, and we're trying our best to get as many people as possible to get the same type of information. Thank you for listening to me, and I open it up to all information, all questions.
Anti-aging looks at what are the markers of aging? What happens? Can you change it? Do we need to look at it? And the other thing, if you look at the big picture, you look at, and this is what I was doing, people would come in at 50 for a physical and was looking for illness. So it's kind of like buying a truck and running it till it's 50,000 miles, and then you look at the truck, then you check the systems, that type of thing. And the other concept that got me going was, if you look at diseases, and the example I always give is a lady who came to see me who had Sjogren's syndrome. So she was in her 30s, and she had the diagnosis of Sjogren's syndrome, and she had seen a lot of doctors. And her symptoms were dry eye, dry mouth, pericarditis about once or twice a month, cystitis, suprapubic pain, and she was a mess, and she'd been to a lot of doctors and got the big workup, and there's not much I can do for you, and that type of thing. But when I for hormones and for all her nutrients, a blood vitamin test, she had about 16 different deficiencies. And so if you start thinking about this, what comes first? Does Sjogren's syndrome cause all these deficiencies? Or do these deficiencies cause what we call Sjogren's syndrome? Now, everybody's into pattern recognition. You know, if X comes in and I size them up and we look at them, then in the box, if you're a fireman, you look at a house that's made out of wood, you go, that's going to go in 20 minutes, you know. So everybody's used to pattern recognition, and that's what we're trained for. But the other thing that struck me is that if you see a lady and they've got a certain disease, you almost accept it. And if you look at different diseases, ladies have the predominant diseases, particularly the autoimmune, lupus, scleroderma again, Sjogren's, all these different diseases, higher incidence of migraines. What's going on? Why do we just accept this in women? There's something going on. They've got a different system going on. And so when a lady would say to me, my migraines are worse before my period, you know, in the early 90s, it'd just go over my head. Or my asthma's worse before my periods, or I bloat, or, you know, all those things. These are progesterone deficiencies. Something's going on. There's a cycle going on. There's 350 articles in the Medline search about natural hormones. So it's been researched, and there's probably 3,000 or more articles about vitamins and how they correlate with different diseases and stuff. So my argument, if you go to your doctor, they should look at the original equipment, look at you hormonally, look at you nutritionally, and then if that doesn't work, then you go to a patent medicine, you go to surgery or steroids or whatever, that type of thing. So that's the concept I want you to start thinking about and change your thinking. So what I wanted to do, and this will give you a little bit of an education about this and see how we start thinking about it. The first description was by Dr. Starling about hormones, which was a chemical messenger, or from the Greek, to excite. And I think that's a good way to think about hormones, that they excite things. And I don't know of anything that's more powerful than hormones and cut across all organ systems. In other words, vitamins have a great role, but hormones, they act fast and they're very powerful. In the 1930s, if you're starting to have miscarriages, the chemical companies came up with DES to lessen your miscarriages. And Rudy's going to mention that hormones read your DNA. And if you don't believe that, think about the daughters and the granddaughters of women who got DES and now have cancers. And this is carried down generation to generation. So this is a big thing that happened. And it was a double ring chemical structure called DES. Then we made Premarin. And we'll talk a little bit about the effects of Premarin, but this was from pregnant mares' urine. They keep the horses in the stall, they keep them dehydrated, they take the concentrated urine, and they make this CES, conjugated equine estrogen. My hero is Dr. Dalton, who in the 1950s, because she had migraines, started using natural progesterones to treat her own migraines. And at that time, and I don't know how she started or what she was thinking about, but progesterone is a smooth muscle relaxant, and that started taking care of her migraines. And she started the first hormone clinic, but at that time, it was described as a PMS clinic, so it was premenstrual syndrome. But I'm impressed in the 1950s that she did this. Then in 1960, Dr. Lemon, doing research, when he looked at ladies with breast cancer, they had low estriol. And estriol is what we call E3. It's the safest hormone. It's the predominant one we use if you're going to get estrogen replacement. And there's been articles saying that it's, quote, the forgotten hormone. Then we started getting some clues about Premarin causing endometrial cancer. And then the reflex was to make a synthetic progesterone, not, oh, let's do the natural like Dr. Dalton is doing. So this point is how we think chemically, or if it's patented, it must be better, or we got to make it up better than God made it, or something. But that's the thinking that goes on. Then there was a Dr. John Lee, no relation, Northern California, started reading about natural progesterone and started prescribing it to his patients and getting great results. And let me comment about that. When I started doing natural hormones on my patients in the early 90s, and when you think about a physician, you got X number of tricks that you can do, and when you start doing something a little different and you get a great response, the ladies start coming back into the clinic, kind of breaking back into the back room and say, my God, this really works, that type of stuff. You start thinking, well, this is something. This is really something. And you start thinking, you may be onto something, or at least it's the correct way to go. Then there got to be more science. Dr. Joel Hargrove did a study, and what he did too, he started working with a compounding pharmacist at Vanderbilt. And this is one of the start of prescription and compounding specifically for natural hormones. And he encouraged us to do further studies on natural hormones. Now, Johns Hopkins took a look at breast cancer, and it's pretty impressive to do a 20-year study. It's hard to hang on to people for 20 years. But it showed that ladies with progesterone, I want to emphasize progesterone is the natural, not progestin, and that's like Jan was talking about. That's the confusion on these things. Progesterone had 1/5 the risk of breast cancer. And this brings up the concept that they talk about called estrogen dominance. You got too much estrogen here, and it's a teeter-totter, a balanced yin and yang type of thing between estrogen and progesterone. So if you don't have progesterone that protects, you've got estrogen, then you may have xenoestrogens and all the stuff on top that gets you to breast cancer. Dr. Jonathan Wright had a lady who came in and wasn't happy with the side effects of Premarin in his office, and he's up in Seattle, and he started looking at, well, what do you have in your 20s and 30s? So we went back to the labs and said, well, there's this balance where it's 80% estriol, the good estrogen, E3, 10% estrone, and 10% estradiol. So he came up with this triest, which we use predominantly, or then there's biest too, that's predominantly estriol, the safe protected hormone. So he came up with triest. Then Dr. Lemon kept going for 27 years, back in the 60s. Now he's at the University of Nebraska still. He found that estriol, the safest of the estrogens, had protection 80% on breast cancer for rats. Then in 1988, what happened is I got encouragement from patients to get this out and stuff like that. So we wanted to do a system that got this out, that got the word out about that. So we've been out now about 4 years and getting this going. The other thing is there's studies about men and testosterone. And the ladies, they all own a man, I'm sure. They have one that they have, and there's men in the audience. And there are studies